maybe a name out there that you might not even recognize that we think might be out there and ready to contribute this forthcoming season. So there you go. There's a look at what we got going in the show. Coulter, I'm glad to be back. I used what was very possibly my last day of vacation.
You don't even know.
For the stretch run, and you took over. It was great, and now I'm back, and now I'm here. And now I'm here forever, okay? So, it's all water under the bridge at this point, but it is good to be back. I'll tell you what, man. The Gorge, now I wasn't out at a concert. I was on the Columbia River, though, over the weekend. The Gorge, phenomenal. I mean, there is just nothing quite like the arid, dry, rocky outcroppings of lava and everything else that surrounds, and then the giant, it's a giant body of water, really. Cruising by. It's sweet out there, man. If you haven't spent time on the Columbia River near Central Washington, do yourself a favor and go do it, because it's an absolute, it's spectacular, it's pretty, it's beautiful, and some good golf courses out there. You can enjoy it. It's a whole different world out there in the middle of the state.
Yeah, it was great. I lived out there for a little while.
That's right.
It was great. It's a great place in the world. I think the Gorge it's up there if it's not the best music venue on the planet. It's pretty sweet.
I mean, Jay's Upstairs was pretty great in its day, but probably the Gorge wins out ultimately.
No doubt. How was your time?
Excellent. My phone died at about 7 p.m. on Friday. It just came back to life about 2 hours ago. That was actually not intentional, although functionally it was fine, but I could not get the thing to charge, and so it was great. I had nobody to talk to, didn't hear anything. I answered about, 100 text messages earlier today. I still got plenty that I need to get to on that thing. But it was very nice. And, yes, you get out there. You have yourself, a reunion of sorts at this point. It's more of a reunion than anything else with friends from college and so forth.
Who did you pick with your first pick?
Well, we auctioned. So
auction.
No
Who'd you spend the big money on?
Well, I will tell you I spent the big money on, but then you also got to understand the dynamics of an auction draft, right?
Sure.
It's not.
You're hedging your bets already. I just want to know what players you got.
Odell.
Okay.
Baker. Juju Smith-Schuster.
Okay.
And your boy, Joseph Mixon.
So you drafted the AFC North.
I did get your boy Cooper Kupp.
Nice.
Brandon Cooks.
Great. Cooper Kupp, MVP.
And I got Carson Wentz as a little $1 backup, which I think is he might actually. I think people are sleeping on Carson Wentz a little bit right now. Hasn't played a lot, gets injured a lot. That's true, but when he's been out there, phenomenal. So, but listen, our draft is so deep in terms of its history that you can't. This is a very atypical draft. It's a keeper league. It's a double flex. It's a lot of things that just throw the market of an auction draft, which is already a minority type of fantasy situation, out the window. Now, you and I got an auction draft coming up this weekend. You prepared for this?
Nope.
Have you ever auction draft before?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't know if you know this, but I'm terrible at fantasy football.
Yes. That is okay.
If I had any fortitude whatsoever, I would just retire and not play anymore.
The thing is of course you want to win. That's why, you play the game. But I would also argue that there is a lot to fantasy football beyond the winning and losing that is an enjoyable experience. And quite frankly, for me, there is a level of work that is attached to it. It is actually double dipping because it's something that I'm doing on my own time, but it's also I'm learning more about the subject matter that I'm supposed to be covering at a rate that's higher than I ever would ordinarily, and so I accept that regardless of the outcome on any given week or any given season.
Well, I'm glad you had fun, and I'm glad you're back, and Mike Nugent's gunning for your job, bro. He was making me call it Nuanez and Nugent by the second hour of the show on Friday.
Okay.
Are you guys familiar with Deadspin?
Oh yeah, we're getting there, Tommy. That's right now. That's the lead segment of the show that's already 8 minutes old.
Hi, Tommy.
Hey.
How are you?
Man, it's great now that I can finally talk to you, and I've got some comments. We've got some talking to make up on, so I'll be screaming in your ears consistently over the show.
You did do a nice job of getting that Osprey game on the air. I understand that people, it's not just so easy as switching the track that the train is on to get a piece of radio on the air that isn't ordinarily coming down the pike. And Tommy did yeoman's work yesterday to have the Seahawks game on, and we look forward to having the Seahawks all season long. But appreciate your efforts.
I appreciate that, man. But I still got to talk to you about this job reference thing.
Yeah, I did respond to that text message.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, late.
Oh.
As I referenced earlier.
Let's get to this
My
dead
phone's
spin
been
thing.
off for 4 days.
Yeah. Rub that in. My phone hasn't been off in almost 8 years. And if it does, I get ripped to shreds.
Well, this was not a volitional choice on my part. This was the phone's decision. But yes, let's talk about Deadspin, because here in the city of Missoula, the Osprey, and more notably the stadium, Ogren Park and Allegiance Field, is now national news because Deadspin, among others, have picked up the story that Mumford and their blasted sons have ruined Osprey Stadium. And basically, we know what happened, right? I mean, it was wet that week. It absolutely poured down rain not long before the show. The ground is wet. You throw 14,000 people into a baseball stadium, and a stadium like a football, like an NFL stadium-sized concert build.
Right.
I mean,
they were building behind the stadium for like a year to get the stage ready to go for that show.
Well, there's a lot, but the stage itself is huge. And then you set it up there on wet grass. I mean, if Golter, you go to the golf course and it's been raining and there's those spots where it all goes down and all you do is step and you sink in. I mean, you could get your cart stuck when it's soppy like that. And the field may not have been that soppy. And I know that they set, there were things underneath it, but just the sheer weight of it, I mean, it just hammered that grass. So the last 3 games, all weekend, which is supposed to be the most recent homestand for the Osprey, postponed. They're playing a doubleheader tonight, which again is why we're on the radio right now, because we will send you up to Great Falls for the Voyagers and Osprey for 2 of them with Chris Jarrett at 5:00. But I don't know. It's one of these bizarre things. But yeah, if you shoot, I think it was NBC Montana that got their drone up there and took a shot of the thing, and you go, hey, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to play baseball in this field. And, it's going to dry out and all that kind of stuff. But does that just getting it dry doesn't necessarily mean that, everything's fine now. Like, I mean, there's a hole out there, right, in right field. I mean, I haven't laid eyes on the
It's
stadium.
not like a full hole, but it's definitely like a sinkhole
like
look. Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal conditions. I can't imagine that any of the pro franchises are going to want any of their prospects playing.
Hey, old
on
Houston Stadium, they put a hill in there. So how about a little bowl? Why not?
It's an unfortunate situation because by all accounts the concert was awesome and it was a great thing for Missoula. And when you're losing games, I mean it's money for the Osprey. But it's also less time for these kids to develop. I mean when you only have a 75-game season, 3, 4, 5 lost games is a significant portion of the year. And so it'll be interesting to see how this impacts everything because it was definitely unfortunate that they had to push the games back this weekend. And, the Osprey in the middle of this fight for maybe a playoff spot. We'll see. Hopefully they can get that situation remedied sooner than later because you need to have your home games here to finish out the summer strong.
No doubt. Well, honestly, as news continues to sort of come across about this and about the scenario, about what's going on, we'll talk about it and bring it to you because it certainly impacts not just Missoula but Great Falls and Billings as well. And Great Falls may be the benefactor, right, where they're getting 2 games now tonight where they would have ordinarily just had 1. And we'll see how the rest of that plays out. I mean, maybe do you have to move it over to Legion Field? Do you have to do something along those lines? I don't know. Speaking of switching fields, though, it's Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. we were listening. I was listening on my drive back last night to the Seahawks Minnesota preseason game, and Dory Monson, who is kind of the host of the pre and the post game show on the radio call, brought up an interesting deal because they're talking a lot about, a lot of teams are not playing almost any starters in either of the first two games and certainly not in the fourth game of the preseason. I mean, essentially it's one game. Russell Wilson did play last night. Kirk Cousins played last night, but of course he's not a starter according to you. So, just from a skill level standpoint, I'm still higher on Cousins than you are, but okay. Point being, there's been much made of, and the commissioner himself saying, we do not need 4 preseason games. It should be 2. I think is kind of the number that is out there. They don't need the games to make these assessments. I actually thought it was interesting that fails me now who I was listening to. It might have been Orlovsky, but talking about, teams do their evaluations tenfold in practice situations than in the game situation. The game is practice for situational football and for live stuff and all of that. But in terms of deciding who's making a team and who's not making a team, you can flash in a preseason game, get your roster spot. I mean, a guy like Victor Cruz comes to mind. But the practices and the camps are where these decisions are largely made and could exclusively be made if they needed to be. And so the preseason games are certainly not necessarily in terms of the extent they have 4, and in a couple cases, like Denver, 5 this year, because if you play in that Hall of Fame game, that's just a +1. So what can you do to continue to appease the ownership, who, of course, are still making money on the preseason games, significant amounts of money? I mean, it's still full ticket prices, even if the barn's not full. And especially your season ticket holders is where you make the bank there, because they are effectively buying those preseason games no matter what. And, you got places where the waiting lists are generational for tickets, for season tickets in some of these, football markets. So, they don't want to lose that, but it's sort of like, what do you do? Well, I talked a while ago, Coulter, on one day that you were actually off, remarkable as that is, that we gave you a day off around here, about all of these different venues that are happening and the baseball being played in London and how that was kind of a joke and impacted the game because Stead Center was $315 or something like that. They're just yanking them out of here. But also like the NHL and their winter series that, outdoors, and how great that seems to be going, and people, get a kick out of that and enjoy it. And Dory Monson talked about, well, what if there were preseason games that were not, at the NFL stadiums, that were other places? And he referenced Spokane and then Alaska. I guess there's a big of course, Alaska, if you're up there, probably Seattle Seahawks fans, up there. Mm-hmm. They have a huge Seahawks, community of people up there in Alaska. But then he also said, what about Missoula, Montana? You go to Washington Grizzly Stadium, play a preseason game. Okay, you can only get 26,000 people in, but, Seattle probably does a little better. They probably have 40 to 50,000 people at a preseason game in Seattle. So you're talking about double or close to double. But the environment, the atmosphere, if you were to have a Washington Grizzly or even, Bozeman, wherever it would be sold out completely, and it would be a real environment. I mean, we all understand the concept, right? If you put 100,000 people in a stadium that sat 1 million, it would feel empty and it would seem lame, even though there was 100,000 people at it. This is just the way it is. You put 26,000 people in a venue that holds 26,000 people, it's so much better than a venue that's 2/3 full, regardless of the size of it. Mm-hmm. And also, you wouldn't, would it be great to see some of the starters play a series or a quarter? Well, of course it would be. But it would be, how unbelievable would it be to have two professional football teams playing professional football in the state of Montana? First of all, I don't know that it's ever happened. And second of all, you and I grew up here, man. going to an NFL football game, you could have landed me on the moon sooner than I would have thought I would be at a game. I mean, it's only a thing that happens on television. There's no chance that you would ever go to this. To have a preseason game there and go and see, even on the sidelines, there's Russell Wilson, there's Bobby Wagner, there's whoever, all these guys. It would be phenomenal. Now, maybe the thrill for the fans in a rural place that carries no national sway when it comes to moving the dial or financially or whatever isn't that impactful. But I also think it would be great for viewing. I think you'd get a lot more people tuning in, at least initially, to a preseason game that was in a place where, I'd watch. If it was in Alaska, I couldn't wait to see that. What does this look like? What's the flyover, with the camera look like up here? What's the setting and that kind of thing? I always find that stuff interesting, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
Remember when the Seattle Supersonics played the Vancouver Grizzlies?
Yes.
At Dahlberg Arena?
Yes.
Mid-'90s. Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, they didn't play. But it was still sweet. It was so sweet. Just to see Sean Kemp in living person was just awesome, And Vita Blue was on the Memphis Grizzlies, or at the time the Vancouver Grizzlies.
Vancouver
Bryant
Grizzlies.
Reeves, Big Country Reeves. But yeah, I think it would be huge if that was to happen. I wonder how serious those possibilities are for the Seahawks or otherwise. Do other teams play preseason games other places?
Basically, no. The only one that's any other place is the Hall of Fame game in Canton.
Right, but some teams do training camp in completely different places.
Right, but they always...
Like the Cowboys do their training camp Oxford, California.
Totally.
So then when they go play games, they go back to Dallas? Yes. Is that how this works?
Yeah.
Huh.
But I guess to tie back into the original thought is in a baseball or hockey, whatever it is, people are looking for ways to expand the sport, right? Even the NFL is playing games in London. They have this London series and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the preseason is an ideal scenario to try and get games at places that they would never be, where you could completely capitalize on that fact, and it would be a huge a boon for in every respect, it seems to me. And let's put it like this: if you play a game in Seattle and people go to the game, okay, but it's just an assessment at that point. There's some cheering and so forth, and Seattle's one of the better fan bases from that standpoint of anywhere. What would it be like for a player who's out there trying to win a job if you're playing in front of whatever the number is of fans who are riveted to everything that's happening in a game?
Imagine if one of those guys was an ex-Grizz.
Right.
Like, imagine this situation was 5 years ago and Brock Coyle was trying to make the Seahawks.
Completely.
There would be 25,000 people going to see one guy.
Yes, absolutely. And how many of these, you could be smart about it too. Like, it would make sense regionally, Seattle, maybe Denver, to be playing in a place like Missoula or Montana State or whatever it might be. But also would be smart. Why wouldn't you have the LA Rams go play in Spokane? They got 7 Eastern Washington Eagles, whatever it is, on the roster. You could do it, with that in mind as well. Now, look, it's no small thing. You're talking about moving 2 teams to a venue that does not host NFL games, trying to get all of the radio, all of the television set up for a major broadcast. Even if it's not, Monday Night Football or whatever, both teams have home television and radio. I don't know what else on the internet, and we saw what it was like when North Dakota State and Montana played, and it was on, was it on the SEC network or was it on ESPN? Just ESPN, right? Yep. And Brent Musburger came and did the call. They had to change so much just to fit the equipment that they had for a normal game into this, so it's really not built for it. It would take a lot of work and effort, but I don't know. I really think it's an interesting concept, and obviously in Montana, you would root for that to happen, but I think that could have legs in a lot of places. If you were willing to do one game, now it comes down to, well, who's not getting a home game? If the Seahawks have a home game in CenturyLink Stadium and then a home game in Missoula, how does the money for that work? Because at this point, it's tied into season tickets and all of that. But if you knew you could sell it out, maybe you just do a gate. I don't know. I think it's a very complex issue, but I think it's one that ultimately could be really, really cool nationwide.
This is what the AF should have been doing.
I mean, the AF had no chance. No chance. It's Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We want to talk a little bit about FBS football. There are a handful of quarterbacks who have pretty significant name recognition that are on teams that have very significant name recognition. We'll talk about a little bit about those guys, where they've moved, and if their teams are going to be better. It's Tootell and Nuanez. A little early edition as we get ready for Osprey Baseball at 5. Back after this.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get up to $150 instant rebate on 4 backcountry MT or AT tires, or $50 on 4 road control passenger tires. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
We ate a lot of steaks before we came up with the Montana Club's Private Reserve Cut Angus. It's as good a steak as you're going to get. Our Private Reserve Cut Angus is specially cut for us. And with our custom seasoning, it has a flavor that's absolutely incomparable. We're confident that it will satisfy the most discriminating steak customer for an unrivaled steak experience. Real Montana, real food. The Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Hey everybody, Ryan Tootell, and I'm here with Josh of the Advocates Injury Law Firm. Josh, there's a lot of lawyers in this area. What makes you different?
At the Advocates, we primarily focus on injury cases. That gives us the experience and the knowledge to correctly evaluate your case and work with insurance companies and other attorneys so you get exactly what you deserve to make you whole again. We take really good care of our clients, and we're going to fight for every single dollar you deserve.
Call 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers. You deserve an advocate.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Ryan Tootell, Colton Nuanez, ESPN Sports Center. The Missoula Osprey had to postpone a third straight home game against the Great Falls Voyagers Sunday night because of unplayable conditions at Oakland Park Allegiance Field. The O's home venue is still recovering from the Mumford & Sons concert attended by more than 11,000 people a week ago. Because of the unplayable conditions, the Osprey and Voyagers will play a doubleheader in Great Falls Monday. The action gets underway at 5 o'clock. It'll be coming up right here, doubleheader on ESPN Radio.
Montana State Bobcats conducted an efficient scrimmage that included about 25 plays for its top 2 strings of players and about 80 plays total. Newly anointed starting quarterback Casey Bauman scored a 1-yard rushing touchdown to cap the first drive of the starting offense. Divine Tullis snatched a 30-yard touchdown grab on the first possession of the 68-minute session. And senior Logan Jones scored a 6-yard touchdown for the second score by the top Bobcat offense. Montana State now shifts into game preparation mode with its opener against Texas Tech less than 2 weeks away.
Josh Hedge overcame a 5-stroke deficit with 8 holes to play and won the 2019 Montana Men's Mid-Amateur Championship at Briarwood Golf Club in Billings. The Billings West graduate beat Bill Dunn of Missoula by 1 stroke with a 3-round total of a 2 under 214. Hedge shot a 369 Saturday to win the title in his first Mid-Am appearance. He won 3 straight men's state Ams from 05 to 07.
This ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound.
It is Tootell and Nuanez. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at kurtzpolaris.com. On Twitter at Gus Tootell. That's me. At Skyline Sports MT for your up to the moment Big Sky Conference sports coverage. And at 1029 ESPN for the station. Before we get into some of these quarterbacks and what they're up to, the FBS level, quickly mention this. Did you see this about Ryan Imhoff, Coulter?
The former Carroll College star?
Yes.
What's his deal?
Ryan Imhoff is a great Carroll College basketball player. It was the NAIA National Player of the Year. Okay? National Player of the Year. Right there in Helena. Has just been admitted to the world-renowned Purdue University Medical Chemistry and Molecular Pharmacology PhD program.
Wow.
So, what do you want to play some video games later, or what are we up to?
It's pretty funny that when I guess it would have been his junior year, he was playing for a coach with, I think, one of the only coaches in all of college basketball, and Carson Cunningham, that has a PhD as well. And Carson Cunningham's a doctor and a professor at Carroll during his coaching time. He was teaching, molecular biology, I think, while also being the head men's basketball coach. A unique situation to be sure, but that had to be one of the most high brain power coach-player combos ever.
I mean, good work. Good work. That's cool. Coulter, we wanted to talk a little bit about the FBS. It's interesting because there's a lot of quarterbacks that are coming out now who are being officially named, the starters. Obviously, at the University of Montana, Dalton Snead is kind of the incumbent guy, and there's been no shift in that, and there will not be, barring injury to him. And then in Montana State, obviously, that was the question, and we had that answered a week ago today, that Casey Bauman is going to be the starting quarterback for Montana State. But there's a bunch of guys around the country at the FBS level who have been named starters, notably, officially today, Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, obviously transferring from Alabama, is going to be the most recent transfer senior starter at Oklahoma. Gone pretty well for the first two.
Yeah. Right,
and we'll see, or the two most recent with back-to-back number one overall picks and Heisman trophies at the spot. So things go pretty well. And also Justin Fields, he's from Georgia originally. Was he at Georgia?
Yeah, he was
to start, and is now at Ohio State. And Ryan Day, obviously the new head coach at Ohio State University, has named Justin Fields the official starter. And so we thought, who are the guys that are moving around that have name recognition as players and also schools that, move around. The other two are the Washington schools. One name that everybody around here is pretty familiar with, Gage Gubrud, grad transferring to Washington State with Mike Leach. And I think he has not, to my knowledge, been named the official starter.
No, it's neck
yet.
and neck still.
But I think there's a good chance that he, at least an even chance that he wins that competition. And also, I think the presumptive starter at the University of Washington is Jacob Eason, who is also a former Georgia quarterback who has transferred to the University of Washington. Coulter, of these guys, and look, Oklahoma and Ohio State, a notch up, even on University of Washington, in terms of the teams and what they're expected to do. And so I don't think you sit here and go, well, who leads their team to the better season? Gage Gubrud, if he gets the job at Washington State, or, Justin Fields at Ohio State. I mean, it's not exactly apples to apples, right? But nonetheless, we could have a conversation about which guy makes their team the most better, pardon the poor English to say it. But which of these guys do you think maybe is most interesting, intriguing, and has the potential, you think, to have a huge monster year at the spot that they're at?
Well, I think that everybody forgot that Jalen Hurts was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year one year, a couple years ago, and then because of a bad first half in a national championship game, Tua Tagovailoa takes over and then takes college football by storm. And it's sort of crazy how there's a parallel narrative there with Trevor Lawrence too. Like, there was no bigger story in college football last year than Tua Tagovailoa until Trevor Lawrence went out and just diced Alabama in the national championship game, and then all of a sudden the world belongs to Trevor Lawrence. It's amazing the way that these guys burst onto the scene, though. I was thinking about this as I was driving the other day. When Sam Darnold first burst onto the scene at USC, people were talking about, this guy being a top 15 quarterback in the NFL day one, like ready to roll out the box. He is in the top half of starting quarterbacks in the league as a teenager. And then as Sam Darnold, we became more acclimated to Sam Darnold, and then we started to kind of pick him apart. And he ended up still being the number 3 overall pick. But what we thought of Sam Darnold this day 3 years ago compared to what we think now is totally different. And I just wonder what's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence in that same element too, because coming out of the national championship game, everybody's saying, is that guy the best quarterback in the world? He looked so good.
Yeah.
But I think it's just easy to forget how good a lot of these guys really are, including Jalen Hurts. And that's why I think at Oklahoma, when you talk about, first of all, his ability to run the ball, I think Kyler Murray is a great athlete who keeps a lot of plays alive with his feet. But Jalen Hurts is a better pure runner of the football.
Sure, no doubt.
And
but Kyler Murray is a dime piece throwing the football too.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I just think that Lincoln Riley is tried and true at this point. He is
no doubt.
There's never been a coach that has not only produced back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners, but then those not only are these guys winning the Heisman, they're straight up number 1 overall pick in the NFL too. He's developing guys that are college dominant and pro ready at the same time. No coach has ever done that. And I think Jalen Hurts is the next guy. I think he has a chance to have an enormous year.
One guy that we also need to include in this, since you mentioned Trevor Lawrence, is Kelly Bryant, who is now the quarterback at Missouri and led Clemson to the national championship, and then was beat out by, the long hair and the rocket arm of Trevor Lawrence. I think, look, Missouri does not have the cachet of, at least from our neck of the woods, any of these schools, Oklahoma and Ohio State nationally, and then Washington State regionally. I think Jacob Eason is a really good player, and I think he's a step up, frankly, for Washington at the position. But Coach Peterson and the Huskies are not an offensive first team the way that Oklahoma is. They're a defensive team, and they can play. They can score points. There's no doubt about that. But they get it done defensively. Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley, they're here to boat race you. And so I'm with you on Jalen Hurts. I certainly think Justin Fields has a ton of talent. I think that the change in coaching, from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day is it's obviously a question mark, but if we're talking about this through the lens of the production of quarterback, you're going to have great talent for sure all the way around, always in Columbus. But whether Justin Fields, what he's going to be able to do and how they're going to be able to move the needle on that is interesting. I think Gage Gubrud with Mike Leach could throw for 100 million yards. He's going to go back there and do all the things. Now, you can call it system, you can call it whatever you want. Generally, whoever's playing quarterback for the Mike Leach team is going to have a phenomenal stat line when it's all said and done. But you and I both know, and people around, how truly talented Gage Gubrud is. He's no question that he is a Pac-12 caliber type of player, and you put him there at Washington State for 1 year, and if he wins the job, he's going to shred.
Oh, he's going to absolutely shred. Luke Falk was such a great decision maker, but he's not a great athlete. He's actually not even a good athlete. Gage Gubrud is a good athlete, and so I think that.
Gardner Minshew is like Baker Mayfield West, or something like this, like with the mustache and the bravado and all that, but nothing like the arm that Mayfield has. But, again, a grad transfer guy who is hugely successful and finds himself in an NFL camp right now, on the shoulders of that year that he had in Pullman.
Totally. I think Gubrud has a chance to have a huge year as well. I don't know much about Eason, but I think that it's always so weird when a guy gets entrenched like Jake Browning did at Washington, and they're never really anything but just okay.
Right.
Like Jake Browning was pretty good the whole time he was there. He was never really bad, but he's never really like as good as people wanted him to be when he first was a true freshman.
I was with a bunch of buddies this weekend, as you know, who are from the Seattle area, almost all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked this very question because I said, Jake Browning is a good quarterback. He's, solid. He's got tremendous experience, obviously, and all that. Well, what is your take? And, the best comment that I heard out of all the comments was my buddy JB, who says, you know what? I've always been down on Jake Browning, not because he's not good, but because he's never going to ultimately get you there. Like, he just wasn't good enough to be a championship type of football player. And look, at the end of the day, and I don't want to put this all on him, but Washington played Alabama in the playoff 2 years ago and played a fantastic game. And they shut down Alabama defensively by and large. But it was all about the Alabama defense and how good they'd been. And I think they scored something like 13 or 14 touchdowns defensively that season. And the one thing that you cannot do is allow this Alabama, you can't make the big mistake. And deep in his own territory, late in a one-possession game, Jake Browning made the unforgivable error, football unforgivable, to throw it out there when he was being pressured and got the easiest pick six walk-in that you've ever seen. And that was it. Like, it was OVER at that very moment, and he was the one who was responsible. And again, it's a lot to put on a kid and say, oh, well, you're the reason. He's a lot of the reason they were there too, but ultimately, he's not the guy who gets the team over the hump. And I think especially if you're talking about national champions, look at the quarterbacks. We talk about the schools. Oh, it's always Clemson. It's always Alabama. Well, it is. Look at the quarterbacks who have won national championships with their teams. And how are they doing? Deshaun Watson seems okay, right? I mean, the Trevor Lawrence, okay. Yeah, obviously. Jalen Hurts still going to get it done, and we think he's going to be great at Oklahoma as well. So I think that's critical, and especially Coulter this is the biggest difference just from a football perspective from the NFL to college. There is no salary cap. You just recruit them. If you can get the 100 best football players on earth at your school, you can have all of them. And it doesn't matter. There's no worry about, where am I going to save money? You can get them all. And if that is the case, then you have got to be able to get the quarterbacks when they're available and bring them in. Have to. And even Alabama, that has traditionally not been that, has done that now. And they're probably going to be good again. That would be my prediction. Go out on a big limb. It's Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. I wanted to take one more moment here and just comment on a thing that you said, because you mentioned Sam Darnold and what we all thought he was 3 years ago. But don't we think still that about him to an extent? Like,
yeah, it's just amazing the honeymoon period.
That's exactly it, because that happens with every guy, right?
The quarterback, certainly. I think that's why, like, knowing what your narrative is, it's such a tough thing when you're just a kid in college. But I do think that knowing what your narrative is key, because I think there's been some guys that have really cost themselves a lot of money. I mean, Matt Leinart is the primary example, right? Matt Leinart decides to go back to school for his senior year.
Matt Barkley, too.
And he takes ballroom dancing, and it's a cute story, and he's just living the dream, being the college quarterback, whatever. Matt Leinart went from the number 1 pick to the number 13 pick. He cost himself millions of dollars by doing that. And then because then there was this narrative of him dropping before he ever played it down in the NFL, that he was just set up to fail in the NFL from day one. He never had a chance to overcome the narrative.
I mean, I don't know. The first part of what you said is fine. I mean, if he goes out there and just plays.
Well, I'm just saying one of the hardest things for prospects, especially quarterback prospects, to overcome is if you're not as good as we thought you were going to be.
But we're not the ones making those choices.
Well, right, but think about just how different it is when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes who's so much better than you ever imagined he could possibly be.
But if Matt Leinart who everybody thought was going to be the greatest ever, came out and threw 50 touchdowns the first year that he ever played, he'd probably still be playing football.
Totally. I do think there's a mental element to it, though, as well.
There is, but I just think I think that has such a bigger effect on us, the national scope. But like at the end of the day, Andy Reid is making the decision about who's playing quarterback for the Chiefs. You got one guy, and then his staff, your quarterback's coach or whatever, to make that decision. And I don't know what happens at the point. There is no question that there have been plenty of coaches who have thought a guy coming out of college was going to be great, and then he may have been okay, but you're right. The drop-off there was so significant from what the projection was to what the reality was that it seemed worse than it actually was. And that hurts a guy. But also, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, and the film speaks for itself, too, to me, and I think that is the bigger catalyst in the result of these guys than anything else, than expectation, although expectation is a bear. Bear off the field is where it's a bear. It's Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Speaking of quarterbacks, there's a new quarterback at NDSU, a redshirt freshman. Could we get 4 more national championships? Trey Lance next.
In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters, and you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up, pump it up.
Summer is more fun with a cold beverage at your side. Stop into Town Pump and pick up refreshing Pepsi and Coke products, 12 packs for only $4.99. Complete your picnic with Calypso Lemonade, 2 for $3.33. Well stocked and ready for you. Town Pump.
Town Pump. Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
More than 60 years ago, R.J. Rangich opened up Rangich Brothers with one thing in mind: quality and family tradition. Those family traditions continue today and live through our family, staff, and those who buy our RVs. So whether your travels include the shores of Flathead, Glacier Peaks, Yellowstone Geysers, or the hidden gems in between, jump into Jayco and experience the best freedom you and your family will ever know. Only where a handshake means something. Rangich Brothers RV Center.
It happens. You're positive you put your bank card back in your wallet, but the next time you need it, it's missing. Avoid the panic and take control with the MyCard app and debit card from Farmers State Bank. Our app lets you control your debit card and securely turn it off right from your phone. Safe, secure, instant. MyCard is available only at Farmers State Bank. Ask about it at any of our 9 locations or learn more at farmersebank.com. Farmers State Bank, member FDIC.
What do you get when you mix every NFL preseason game? Cold beer and the best wings in Missoula? The Desperado Sports Tavern. The Desperado is Missoula's premier Southside sports tavern. With 32 HD TVs, there's not a chance you'll miss a second of every NFL preseason game. It's time to start watching your favorite players and building your fantasy team at the Desperado. That's cold beer, NFL preseason, the best wings in Missoula, and you at the Desperado Sports Tavern, located on Russell, across from the Y.
Tootell and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
No time like the present. Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at kurtzpolaris.com. Coming up at the top of the hour, 12 minutes from now, the Montana Football Hour. We normally do it in the first hour of the show, but we're doing it in the second hour of the show because the show's an hour early. See how that works? Why are we an hour early? Well, because the Osprey are having a doubleheader coming up, 5 o'clock at Great Falls, trying to make up some games after missing a couple over the weekend due to the field conditions there at Oakland Park Allegiance Field. We are happy to be with all of you. Thanks for spending some time with us. Tommy has some things that he wants to talk about, so we'll get to him in a moment. But quickly, Coulter, North Dakota State has a new quarterback. They went from Carson Wentz to Easton Stick. Seemed to go pretty well with those two. And now Trey Lance, the new quarterback, officially a redshirt freshman. They just keep going 4-year starter to 4-year starter, don't they, there in Fargo. Out of Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, is where Trey Lance comes from. What do we need to know about the new QB at the most prominent FCS school in the country?
Well, it's actually interesting that you start with Brock Jensen, who won 3 straight national titles with Craig Bowles, the head coach of North Dakota State. He was a 4-year starter. And you mentioned Easton Stick being a 4-year starter, and now Trey Lance has a chance to be a 4-year starter. The only guy who wasn't a 4-year starter is Carson Wentz, right. Who happens to also be a Pro Bowl quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
But a part of me, and I think a part of just the people that follow the FCS in general, think at some point North Dakota State has to take a small step back when you talk about the winningest class in school history. I mean, they had like 28 seniors last year. I mean, Easton Stick went 49-3 in his career. I mean, it's Robbie Grimsley, their starting strong safety. He started 61 games.
And a new coach.
And now they have a new coaching staff. I mean, how do you replace? There's no one that's played 60 college games. How do you replace that experience? There is no precedent for that. Robbie Grimsley is perhaps the most seasoned player in the history of college football, starting from the day he walked on campus until winning the national championship game. It's amazing.
It is.
But so I think conventional wisdom says that they'll take a step back. But on the other hand, the number one thing that I am so interested to see is that North Dakota State had this attitude and culture of winning when they won their first three-peat. And then they reloaded, and everybody on their squad was a little bit more talented because they had recruited then to 3 straight national championships. As you go from Brock Jensen, who was a borderline NFL guy who now still plays in the CFL, to the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft in Carson Wentz. You know, you go from a guy like John Crockett, good running back, who had a cup of coffee in the NFL, to guys like, I mean, the running backs last year were absurdly good. Those guys were straight. I mean, they could have played in the Big Ten, no doubt. I mean, Lance Dunn is lights out. So what I'm getting at is Trey Lance was a 4-star recruit out of Minneapolis. Trey Lance chose North Dakota State over Iowa, Minnesota, and Michigan. Like this is not. He also had offers from Northern Illinois and Air Force and a couple other mid-major FBSs, but I mean, he's a Big Ten recruit that's choosing North Dakota State. And so, like, when you look at a guy like Jabril Cox is so much more talented than the FCS. I mean, he is a straight Power 5 player, an outside linebacker. So when you get a whole cycle of those guys, because I think they have a ton of them waiting in the wings. It's not as if the recruiting has gotten worse when you have 7 out of the last 8 years of national championship rings to show kids, when you have the facility upgrades that they've made. I mean, the rich only get richer. So a part of me says, okay, maybe they will take a step back. Another part of me says, well, what if Trey Lance is just the best guy that they've had yet at quarterback? Who knows? I mean, it remains to be seen, but make no mistake, the cupboards are not bare, even though they have lost a ton of headliner players and, of course, Chris Kleiman and his entire coaching staff.
The difference, as best as I can explain it, or as I see it anyway, between NDSU and everybody else is when the top programs, the FCS level, get guys who are Power 5 types of players, and they do, and they get numbers of these guys, there's usually, in fact, almost always a story to be told. A guy didn't have the academics, had to go the JC route, landed there. A guy went there, wasn't what he thought it was going to be, came somewhere else. Maybe it was a projection thing. Hey, he was only 6'3", 240 when he was a junior in high school, but we saw his hand size and we knew. Something like that. At NDSU, they're just recruiting the guys, and they want to go play there. And that is pretty impressive. It's Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Tommy, we are we're building on the fly here as we go throughout a Monday afternoon show. It's been a hectic weekend for you. It was certainly a hectic weekend for me. But here we are, getting the thing done. Coulter's under the weather, sniffling away. What is it that you have for us today? What would you like to talk about in our Tommy's bucket of gold segment.
Now, wait a minute here. I didn't realize that you were giving me a segment in the show. I just thought we were going to chit-chat about all of the things of the world.
Now, I thought off the top that you said that you had something that you wanted to speak to me about.
Every day I've got something I want to speak to you about.
Okay, so it's not your segment, so just speak to me then about what you want to speak to me about.
Okay, well, what I wanted to talk to you about was, as your producer, I will tell you, if you're not going to have your phone for 4 days, you got to drop me an email, man. You got to do something. Jeez. I was stressed. I was worried about you.
Well, but my phone is my email.
There are other ways to use the electronic mailing system than your cellular device.
I will say even a dope like me could have probably launched off an email. I just assumed, you're just so good, Tommy, that, you're not going to need me. What could I possibly be bringing to the table?
What I really want to discuss today, and I don't want to have another debate about whether the Beatles are good or bad, but I want to discuss why the Beatles broke up. And I'm reading this new article today, which was published. So the Beatles are coming up on the 50th release of their Abbey Road record, which is one of the all-time great records that the Beatles ever did. And there's this new story that has been unearthed from a sound engineer at Abbey Road that during the recording of that final Beatles record, it was almost the final Beatles record, Yoko Ono had a freaking king-size bed delivered to the actual recording studio where they were recording the songs, and she was just sitting there in this bed while the band was trying to record, and they're saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" She says, "Oh, I'm hungry." And she goes over and she takes one of George Harrison's cookies off of his amp. He had these cookies that he liked, and she took one. And he freaked out, called her a mean name, and then that's when him and John started fighting. Don't call my girlfriend this, that, and the other. And then they stopped recording together. They never had a full-on all four Beatles recording session again after that. And so, Coulter, I'd like to know, I recognize you hate the band, but you've got to have an opinion on Yoko breaking up the band or Fame breaking up the band or whatever it is.
Oh, man.
That must have been a great cookie.
It must have been an Oreo, as far as I can tell, because I'd do battle for an Oreo any day.
I think that there's a distinct parallel between music and sports. I think that often it's just like we were talking about in the last segment with the honeymoon period for up-and-coming young quarterbacks, how much we love them, and then once you reach the fever pitch, then we start to tear you down. I think that there's a certain element when you talk about legacy and the parallels between legacy and music and sports that are very similar. And I think that there's so often we see athletes that are legendary that play too long. And it sort of demeans. Vince Carter's a great example. Think if Vince Carter would have just played for 10 years, how legendary he would be. He still is now because he's sort of remaking his career as this guy that's in his 40s and he's still in the league, as a guy who used to be the most athletic guy in the world and now is not, yet he's still making a living. But what I'm getting at is that I think that a part of the mystique and the legend of the Beatles is that it only lasted for 10 years. If they were just this Rolling Stones type band that's still touring, I don't know if they have the same gravitas as they do now. I don't
know if the Rolling Stones is the one.
It's a bad example. The Rolling Stones is a bad example. But like Bob Dylan sitting up here with gargling marbles in his mouth. I mean, the last time he was here, it was just terrible, right? Yeah. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is that I think that a lot of times when all you ever get to consume is the absolute peak of somebody's talent, whether they're an athlete or a musician, I think that that's when they are revered and remembered, and perhaps in the most elevated light.
Should Tiger quit?
There's a great example. If Tiger Woods, like what we've had to watch of Tiger Woods, with the exception of this last spring where he had this epic, unforgettable win at the Masters. But other than that, I mean, Tiger has done nothing but degrade his own legend. It makes you long for what he used to be. But, I mean, imagine if Tiger would have never, I mean, if it was just from 1997 till 2009, that was it of Tiger Woods. I mean, you're talking about no one would ever even question that was the greatest athlete of all time.
But what about, but then you wouldn't have that moment. You wouldn't have had the Masters win. I think about Johnny Cash, right? Like Johnny Cash was like, this great singer-songwriter or whatever, and then he had, a bunch of demons that he battled and everything else, and was, I think, for a long time kind of, lost a little bit and not really, kind of out there. And I don't know, people had a bit. And then he comes back and he does the acoustic show at the Viper Room, and then and all of a sudden reemerges as this, legendary figure down the road, which, I think cemented his legacy in a lot of ways. It's hard to know how it's going to go unless you go out there and do it. Thank you, Tommy. I'll be looking for that Oreo later. It's Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Hour number 1 in the books. Hour number 2 straight ahead. Early show today because got a doubleheader at the top of the hour, Osprey baseball. So we are going to do next what we do every Monday around here at 4 o'clock, the Montana Football Hour. Montana State, their second scrimmage in the books. We'll hear from Jeff Choate next.
Hey folks, Ryan Tootell, and I'm here with Josh of the Advocates. Josh, do most injury accidents end up in court?
Luckily, most personal injury cases can be settled out of court through a fair negotiation with an insurance company. However, sometimes it is necessary. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to get a fair settlement. Luckily, most personal injury cases can be settled out of court with a fair negotiation with the insurance company. However, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to get the right settlement for you.
It's Josh at the Advocates, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at canyonrivergolfclub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Alpine Touch makes the perfect gift this summer or any time of year. If you are traveling, bring a gift that is distinctly Montana and give your loved ones some of the best spices anywhere around. From the Alpine Touch Pick 4 Spice Pack to the all-purpose Twin Pack to the mouth-watering sunflower shoots to Alpine Touch gift cards. Alpine Touch makes the perfect Montana present. Available at retail locations around the state or online for a limited time. Use the code ESPN10 at checkout to get 10% off any online order. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
When you need a bank to help ramp up your savings strategy, look to your local bank, Opportunity Bank of Montana. Build confidence in your financial future when you create a rainy day cushion or take care of the nest egg you already have. Opportunity Bank offers options from basic savings to money market accounts and certificates with competitive rates. There's nothing like the feeling of progress, so let's get started today. Come see us at Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com. Member FDIC.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana. KKVU HD3 Stevensville and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. I am Ryan Tootell. And Colton Nuanez is here as well for a little Sports Center. The Missoula Osprey had to postpone a third straight home game against the Great Falls Voyagers Sunday night because of unplayable conditions at Ogan Park Allegiance Field. The O's home venue is still recovering from the Mumford & Sons and Portugal the Man concert, which was attended by more than 11,000 people a week ago. Because of the unplayable conditions, the Osprey and the Voyagers will play a doubleheader in Great Falls tonight. The action gets underway at 5 p.m., provided the umpires have found their way to that venue.
The Montana State Bobcats conducted an efficient scrimmage that included about 25 plays from its top two strings of players and 80 total plays. Newly anointed starting quarterback Casey Bauman scored a 1-yard rushing touchdown to cap the first drive by the starting offense. Divine Tullis kicked off the scrimmage by snatching a 30-yard touchdown grab on the first possession of the 68-minute session. Senior Logan Jones scored a 6-yard touchdown for the second score by the top Bobcat offense. Montana State now shifts its into game preparation mode with its opener against Texas Tech less than 2 weeks away.
Josh Hedge overcame a 5-stroke deficit with 8 holes to play and won the 2019 Montana Mid-Amateur Championship at Briarwood Golf Club in Billings. He's from Billings West, and done. He had won 3 straight men's amateur titles from 2005 to 2007 before this one.
This ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound.
Now they always say congratulations. Work so hard, forgot how to vacation. They ain't never had the dedication. People hating, say we changing, look, we made it.
Hey, boys and girls, it's 4 o'clock. And it's time for the Montana Football Hour. It is Tootell Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you missed anything in the first hour, you can check it out on the podcast. The podcast available on the TuneIn Radio app, iTunes, Spotify, all of these places. Wherever you get your podcasts, get the Tootell and Nuanez podcast. It is there thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. If you'd like to call, 329-1899 is the phone number. All guests join us via the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. Once again, Tootell and Nuanez is an hour early today, but we're keeping the Montana Football Hour in its normal spot from 4 to 5. If you're watching us on SWX, thank you very much. It is an hour late for you because it's on from 4 to 6 there. Don't ask me how we're moving around in time. You know?
Impressive technology.
It is impressive technology. I hear you can do the same thing if you go very, very fast, like approaching the speed of light. The Montana Football Hour is brought to us by Lithia Ford of Missoula. And Coulter, the Montana State Bobcats had a scrimmage this weekend over there in Bozeman. Their second scrimmage, and I believe their final scrimmage of the fall camp, had named Casey Bauman the starting quarterback coming out of the first scrimmage. And so now you get a chance to really kind of hit the reps with your definitive ones, definitive twos, get the numbers that you want going. We'll hear from Jeff Choate after that scrimmage on a number of different things, but you were over there, and what was your feel about, going around camp there in Bozeman as we're, now halfway through camp and on our way to opening day?
Yeah, I mean, camp's over at Montana State now. They wrapped camp, so it is now basically into game preparation. Practices are now closed. They'll have practices this week, then Thursday's media day, so I'll be going over to Bozeman for the morning. I'll be back for our show at Locals on Thursday, so be there for that. But a couple different impressions. First of all, Casey Bauman was noticeably nervous, and he did not look good. He was trying to finesse. He had 3 or 4 different throws where they were play action, deep throws up the sideline, which is basically the number one strength that helped him win the starting job. And he was trying to finesse those throws. He kind of just floating the ball. He only had 2 completions for 34 yards. 28 of those 34 yards came on one catch by Kevin Cassis, where Bauman he overthrew Cassis by a long shot, and Cassis just made an absolutely ridiculous catch. So Bauman didn't look sharp. What I've said, I'm no offensive coordinator. I'm not some college football offensive genius. I'm the farthest thing from it. But I seriously, this is not just a joke. If I was Montana State, I would straight up run a 5 quarterback system. I'm serious. I am serious. I am not kidding. If I was Montana State, I would play Travis Johnson for 20 snaps a game at quarterback, Troy Anderson for 15 snaps a game at quarterback, Kevin Cassis for 8 to 10 snaps a game at quarterback, and Casey Bauman for 15 to 20 snaps a game at quarterback. And I would run as high up tempo as I possibly can, and I would run a variation of the spread option every single time. When Montana State's first team offense was on the field, they let Troy Anderson have 2 offensive series. The first 2 times that the ones were in, Troy Anderson was on offense going against the number 2 defense, and then he was also on the number 1 offense going against the number 2, or the number 1 defense going against the number 2 offense.
Right.
But the 2 series that he was in, they operated at an incredibly fast tempo. And when that's what I'm saying is, just change the trigger, man, and run the same play. Have the option to give the ball to Isaiah Fonse. I mean, when you line up Travis Johnson at quarterback and you put Kevin Cassis in motion and you have a jet sweep fake and you have Troy Anderson come in motion on the other side, and now you're running the triple speed option with Fonse, Travis Johnson, and Troy Anderson pressing the edge. If you make the right decision with the ball, the defense has no chance. You are getting 9 to 12 yards every time, and if they miss a tackle, you're gone.
Yeah.
So I just think that Montana State has a couple guys that I really think are truly the best athletes in the league. And that would be my third impression, is that as unbelievable as Troy Anderson was last year, Troy Anderson is even more unbelievable now. He's physically matured, you can tell. I mean, this happens when you're just a kid, right? I mean, Troy Anderson was a teenager and now he's not. It's the little things, but like Troy Anderson's got a big mustache now. That's a real thing. Like, the kid is growing into himself. He truly looks, he looks like a man now, and he is just such an unbelievable athlete. And watching him, I really don't know who to compare him to. I was
think that you and I should go the mustache route.
I mean, you'd look pretty good in a mustache. But just watching the way Troy Anderson moves and operates, he has NFL talent at linebacker. I think that's no secret. Everybody knows that. But I just think that if you gave him a full load on offense, he's going to score 20, 25 touchdowns. And I don't know how you equate that. What sort of defensive production does he have to overwhelm the fact that if you really did just give him the ball, I mean, he could lead the country in touchdowns. It's a crazy question that they have to ask themselves. I think it's a very delicate situation because he really can do it all, but you don't want the kid to get worn out. And last year he got big time banged up, and he missed all spring with what amounted to an undisclosed injury, but he's wearing a cuff on his shoulder. So it had to be a shoulder thing, and you just never want to wear him out. But I guess my number one impression leaving Bobcat Stadium was that Montana State, their talent, the amount that their talent has increased. They increased their talent each year under Jeff Choate, but now they hit the breaking point where now when their ones and twos are in, they have dudes across the board. They have almost no weaknesses. And that my number one impression walking out of the stadium was the coaches just have to figure out how to do this thing right this year, because if they do, Montana State has a real chance to make a run at the league title. I really think that. And if they don't, I mean, I think that there is so many factors that don't have to do with talent that are the number one factors that could derail their season. And I think that's why just harmony and being on the same page and consistency and building a foundation and not having volatility in any form is the number one key to their season.
Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, the Montana Football Hour. Here is a little bit of sound for you from Jeff Choate. This is a portion of his opening statement to the media immediately after the spring game, or excuse me, the second scrimmage on Saturday.
Got some good work early in the kick game. Didn't really put a lot of pressure on the kickers, but they made their kicks, and so that's what counts. And we were able to, I think, get some good work tonight. I think there's going to be some opportunities to maybe create some separation in that tight end position. Talked about the linebacker really being a tight race right now, and then just continue to improve and evaluate. I think we know what we have with some of our guys, and there's some guys that I thought had some nice day. I mean, I thought, Shane Perry's a guy I kind of mentioned day one, and he showed up and did some nice things in the run game. And then we had some young guys that I think got a little nervous once we put the real uniforms on. Some drop passes and some blown assignments, and just some guys that are just not quite as focused as they probably needed to be.
There you go, Jeff Choate, just kind of opening things up in a very general sense. But Coulter, he spoke more specifically after a couple of questions about Casey Bauman and him playing under center, and also what he is. Not so much as a runner, but when they want to implement the quote-unquote +1 run game, which is tradition. What we think of when we think of the Wildcat. What's the beauty of the Wildcat? If there is a beauty to it, it's the fact that you have the runner of the football is getting it, so the quarterback is not quote-unquote eliminated by simply just giving the ball away. The first question, though, is what do you like about having Bauman under center, specifically as opposed to in the shotgun?
Yeah, they ran a lot of plays under center. And I think what Jeff Choate says here, I think this is going to actually become a trend. It already is. Teams are going back under center. Not a lot of teams. The teams like Oklahoma who have their DNA, I mean, they're just going to be a gun spread team always. Ohio State, they're pretty much stuck in the spread because of their personnel. But I think a lot of teams are going to start reverting towards going under center a little bit more, and here's why.
Well, I think that's going to be some of it, but even today, I think he showed his ability to run the ball. I mean, we made him live on a couple of plays, and he did a nice job pouring it into the end zone. From a linebacker coach perspective, play action is way better under center than it is in the gun. I mean, you can see the mesh. You don't dive into the line of scrimmage quite as hard, and so being a run-first team, for us to maximize our ability to push the ball down the field, we've got to be good in the play action. And one of the ways that we can be better in play action is to present a harder run cell, and that is better under center, in my personal opinion.
So there you go. Having an opportunity. Part of it is the added element of deception that he thinks it brings, right?
I think that because of just this explosion of how often teams want to pass, both at the college and the NFL levels, the art of the play action fake it's not. it's not as sought after as it once was or as it should be. I mean, Peyton Manning, the most underrated part of Peyton Manning's game was his play action fakes. You thought Edgerrin James had the ball until all of a sudden Peyton Manning's got the ball, and he used to just. And Michael Vick was the same way. When Michael Vick would hold the ball like behind, he'd play action and then he'd like hide it behind his back for a minute and then sprint out. I mean, that was some of the most unstoppable quarterback play, and it's because of the fake. I mean, I remember when Montana State was at their best under Rob Ash, Denarius McGee was unbelievable in the play action. His just ability to play action fake was so underrated, and I think that when you have a 6'7" quarterback and you have all the running back talent that Montana State has, not just running back, just playmaking talent that they're going to hand the ball to, I do think that the play action is going to be where they make so much of their money this year offensively, if they can do it. But again, I've been hyping the Cats all month because I think they have a ridiculously high level of talent. I really do. But I also think that so many of the intangible factors that make sports great are going to be all the key factors for Montana State this year. I think that's why it's going to be such a fascinating season to cover of theirs.
Jeff Choate did also talk about the +1 run game, and specifically, I mean, you said, I think they should go to a 5-quarterback system. 5. And they certainly did sub in and sub out a lot of guys at the quarterback spot.
They'd played 6 quarterbacks before the scrimmage was 30 minutes old.
Okay, so maybe they're doing that. So here's the question, though, that was asked. If you have a starting quarterback, which you evidently do in Casey Bauman, is it hard for him to maybe find a rhythm when he's constantly in and then leaving for various wildcat packages and things of that nature? Here's what Coach Choate had to say about that.
Well, I think that's going to be some of it, but even today, I think he showed his ability to run the ball. I mean, we made him live on a couple of plays, and he did a nice job pouring it into the end zone on one, and that was something we wanted to see by design today, and we've done that with him a couple times because I do think he's a capable runner. And a lot of the +1 run game stuff doesn't have to go out the window because he's our quarterback. It needs to continue to be a part of our package.
I mean, this is obvious enough, but here's what it can't be. Oh, Bauman's in. This is a throwing play or a handoff. Oh, Bauman's out. Okay, now it's a quote-unquote wildcat or a +1 situation. Like, he's got to be able to do all that stuff, and it would be also nice if you had a guy who was in there in a traditional +1 setting that might throw the ball every once in a while. I mean, you're right. You could do a ton of deception based on personnel and, breaking tendencies when you've, 80% of the time you're running this, all of a sudden you don't do it and you catch somebody, not paying attention.
Boise State, at their best under Chris Peterson, ran more trick plays than anybody in the country.
Yes, they did.
And I truly think that Montana State's strategy out the gates this year is going to be early on, first series or 2 of the game, get the defensive head spinning by playing all sorts of different quarterbacks. You're running reverses. You're running wide receiver reverse passes. Where's Torrey Anderson? How are you getting him the ball? Where's Travis Johnson? How are you getting him the ball? And just try to get 2 quick scores off of all this crazy stuff, and then let your defense go to work. Have Casey Bauman just take the snap and hand it off to Isaiah Fonse and ride it out. I think that that's exactly what they should do, and I think that's what they're going to try to do.
I've heard a lot of people, Coulter, who have, decried, things like the Boise State offense for their trickery and basically say, it's not real football, or, they have to do that because they're not as good as the teams that they're playing, and so forth and so on. And I've always found that to be so hollow because my thought is, like, the point of the game is to score points on offense. So if you got things that can do, I have always felt and continue to feel that the amount of variation that exists in football is such a small actual window. And I'm sure, look, there, like you said, I'm no offensive genius sitting here, but when I look at the modal realm when it comes to offensive football and the area of possibility of the way that you can line 11 guys up, and like you said, I laughed in your face when you said it, and that's an indictment on me that you should have a 5-quarterback system. Well, why wouldn't you have a 5-quarterback system? Like, I understand why not, but also, has it ever been done before? No. In fact, 2 quarterbacks, most of the majority of people who quote unquote know these things are, well, that's terrible, that won't work, the rhythm of the quarterback and so forth and so on. And I'm sitting here going, you know what? If the points to score points, who cares
who's sitting there with the thing under center. And if it's a whole bunch of different dudes, because you got a whole bunch of different things, that would seem to me to be a very difficult thing to try and figure out defensively. And if they're capable, and if you got the personnel and the brains to do it, in terms of the players, and they're able to understand. I mean, that's a hard ask for an offensive line, right? When you got a bunch of different guys coming in under center to run various packages and so forth. But I don't know, get up there and do it. And why is that so weird? Why is this stuff never really even considered? And it's just like, laughed at when it's put out there.
Troy Anderson scored 13 touchdowns of 50 yards or more last year as a wing T quarterback, basically. There's no team that you can think of in the modern era, at least, that had that sort of explosive ability without having to. I mean, there's a margin for error on every single play, right? And that's why old school coaches gravitate towards running the ball more than throwing the ball, because there's less of a chance for error. Well, if the only chance for error is just snapping the ball to the guy who's going to have the ball, and then you don't have to have another opportunity for an error after that, I mean, that it's the safest way you can play. But then if you also factor in that this guy, whether it's Troy Anderson or Travis Johnson, can take it to the house when you run that sort of play, it's just very unique in the scope of what college offenses have evolved into. And rather than trying to figure out how you're going to get Travis Johnson the ball now that you've switched him to wide receiver, why not just line him up at quarterback 15 times a game and just snap it to him and just let him go? There's just very few guys that have the level of superior athleticism compared to their competition, and those are the guys that are going to absolutely dominate. Emmanuel Butler was like that at Northern Arizona when he was healthy. Keelan Doss was like that at UC Davis, where you're just so much better than the guys you're going against. You just cannot be stopped. But there is no one that I've ever covered that is more superior to the athletes he is competing against than Troy Anderson. I mean, you can talk about Cooper Kupp and all these guys. There's nobody that was dusting people by 20 full yards like Troy Anderson was doing last year.
I played a little pickup basketball with my daughter's friends. I thought I was pretty superior. Dominant, even. It's Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Coulter, a couple more things about Montana State here, and then we'll take a break and we'll get into some of the sleepers, especially at the University of Montana, guys who we think are going to be good next year that maybe aren't on everybody's radar. But they wrap up camp today, and they effectively it's just vocabulary about the phase that they're leaving as opposed to the phase they're entering. But tell people, I think people have a fairly good idea in general of, what practice looks like of game week.
Right.
But this is a very awkward, maybe not awkward, but it's a very unique week of practice where it isn't game week, but it's also not camp. It's going to be sort of a faux game week. They're going to start to get game preparation going. But
Right.
what's going to take place, both in Montana and Montana State, in the week that's 2 weeks out from the start of the actual season?
Well, it's a little bit more secretive at the University of Montana, so I'm not actually sure exactly the specifics of how they're going to do it. But like Montana State, for example, they have a mock game on Saturday, which is closed, but that's something where they're basically going to simulate a game, not in playing the plays, but we're out on the field for half an hour before the game. We're doing our warm-ups. Okay, now first team kickoff unit, you're on the field. It's just to get the substitutions down so that you know that you're not going to have procedural penalties and stuff like that. But so they're going to prepare for that mock game with a mock game week, which one thing that's an interesting decision is that Jeff Choate decided to give these guys Thursdays off each week rather than the traditional Mondays. I think that'll be interesting because then you have a later in the week where you can get a little bit more juice, and then you have Friday to kind of just get your legs underneath you, and then it's game day on Saturday. So you're not wearing yourself out leading up to the game. You have the recovery is a little bit more similar. So they're going to do that for the first time this week. As far as the University of Montana goes, they closed practice on Saturday, which I think means that they probably had a pretty thorough live session. There's no scrimmages on the schedule. They're saying that they're not having scrimmages, but you know that they're having scrimmage-like activity. And when they closed practice on Saturday, I assume that that's what they were doing, is scrimmaging. So I think that they'll probably do that again. I think they'll probably have a week of practice and then probably have another closed non-scrimmage practice.
It's not a high ankle sprain, but it's an injury that has portions of a high ankle sprain in it.
Right.
Yes.
So, and I imagine that's probably what they're going to do as well. But I think that these two teams will probably, as of Sunday, really start implementing game plans and start preparing for South Dakota if you're the Grizz or Texas Tech if you're the Cats.
It's Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It is the Montana Football Hour. Take a quick break. On the other side, sleepers. Who's going to be good? What players to watch for that maybe aren't on everybody's radar? We'll get to that right after this. The Montana Football Hour is presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. Hurry up and save with Lithia Ford of Missoula. Save an estimated 20% off the new 2019 Ford F-150. That's right, 20%. Plus, earn complimentary maintenance through Ford Pass Rewards. The Ford F-150 features best in-class capability for work or play. This makes tough tasks look easy, whether you're working on the job or heading out on a weekend of recreation. The good deals don't stop there. You can also save an estimated 20% off on the 2019 Ford Edge, Escape, and Expedition. It's the Hurry Up and Save sales event with Lithia Ford of Missoula. These great deals won't last, so be sure to drive away in your new Ford before September 3rd. Lithia Ford of Missoula and online at lithiafordmissoula.com.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get up to $150 instant rebate on 4 backcountry MT or AT tires or $50 on 4 road control passenger tires. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
Hey folks, Ryan Tootell here, and I'm with Josh from the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, if our listeners have been injured in an accident, how can you help?
We're here to help you after a car accident by negotiating with insurance companies, recovering lost wages if you have any, and even getting you into a rental car if you need one. Call us today for a free consultation, and we'll get started helping you right away.
If you need help, get a hold of the Advocates. Call Josh at 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve an advocate.
The Polaris Factory Authorized Clearance is here. The world's best-selling off-road lineup is priced to move with financing as low as 3.99% and rebates up to $3,500. Live life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger or take on any task or trail in a versatile Polaris General. The best deals of the year are happening now. See Polaris.com or your Polaris dealer for rebates up to $3,500 and financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months during the Polaris Factory Authorized Clearance. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. Kurtz Polaris is now showcasing all of the new 2020 Polaris off-road vehicles. To be the first to get a great deal on brand new state-of-the-art Polaris vehicles at Kurtz Polaris. Online at KurtzPolaris.com. Rebates valid in U.S. through 9/30/19 on new 2015 through 2019 vehicles. Financing offer valid on 2015s through 2020s. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Ryan Tootell, Colton Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It's time for a little Sports Center. The Missoula Osprey had to postpone a third straight home game against the Great Falls Voyageurs on Sunday night because of unplayable conditions at Ogren Park and Allegiance Field. The O's home venue is still recovering from a Mumford & Sons concert attended by more than 11,000 people a week ago. Because of the unplayable conditions, the Osprey and Voyageurs are scheduled to play a doubleheader in Great Falls tonight. However, it's unclear if that will happen, given a situation with the umpires who are still working to get to Great Falls for the game. The action, in theory, will start at 5 o'clock. It can be heard here on ESPN Radio if, in fact, it does come to pass. The Montana State Bobcats conducted an efficient scrimmage that included about 25 plays for its top 2 strings of players and 80 total plays. Newly anointed quarterback
Casey Bauman scored a 1-yard rushing touchdown to cap the first drive of the starting offense. Divine Tola snatched a 30-yard touchdown grab on the first possession of the 68-minute session. Logan Jones scored a 6-yard touchdown for the second score by the top Bobcat offense. And Montana State now shifts into game preparation mode with its opener against Texas Tech less than 2 weeks away.
Josh Hedge overcame a 5-stroke deficit with 8 holes to play and won the 2019 Montana Men's Mid-Amateur Championship at Briarwood Golf Club in Billings. Hedge won 3 straight Men's State AMs between 2005 and 2007.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound.
Who are the sleepers for the Grizz and the Cats next season? It's Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It is the Montana Football Hour, presented by Lithia Ford. 4 to 5 every Monday. That's what we do around here. Football all season long. Love it. Favorite time of year. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris is at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Recreate the right way this season. Kurtz Polaris. Pontoon boats, everything at Kurtz. If you would like to listen live and you're out of the market, or maybe it's just easier, or whatever the reason is, you go to a website, 1029ESPN.com, and click the Listen Live tab. There you can listen to the stream. The stream is available thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. Coulter, you said, hey, let's talk about some sleepers. Because there's some guys, particularly as you've been watching the University of Montana, who are guys that are going to be playing this year and that you think could actually step up and have some pretty big games, pretty big seasons, frankly, that maybe aren't on everybody's radar. So let's go through a couple of these guys and say, talk to us about who you think we should be looking out for and paying attention to.
My number one sleeper for the Grizz is Mitch Roberts, kid from right here in Missoula Sentinel. And Mitch was a high school quarterback who then transitioned to receiver. And I think that there's been a lot of guys in this Grizz program that have really benefited from the coaching change, but I really think that Mitch Roberts is one of the guys that have benefited the most from the coaching change, because Bob Stitt was just going to recruit receiver after receiver after receiver. And no matter what level Mitch Roberts is able to develop at receiver, I just think that he was always going to get out-recruited even if he was good enough to get playing time. And now in a program that prioritizes individual development and prioritizes hard work and prioritizes a selfless attitude, I thought that Mitch Roberts had probably the best offseason of anybody on the entire Grizz football team. I mean, Mitch Roberts went from a guy who was 15th, 16th, 17th on the list of receivers to a guy who's, when they announced the starting lineup against South Dakota, he's going to be a starter. He's starting. He's getting 1 reps over Samari Torre, who's also had a great offseason and who's also shown flashes of returning to the form that made him such a standout when he was a freshman and a sophomore. So I think that Mitch Roberts, when you look at his family and where, his brother was such a tremendous athlete, but Mitch Roberts is such a great athlete. He goes and gets it, man. I've seen him make so many diving catches in practice. He just goes all out and he catches everything. And I just think that having a guy like him, who's a Missoula guy, a Montana guy, who dreamed of playing for this program his whole life, like when Mitch Roberts is the one that's getting announced in the starting lineup, that spurs on Gabe Sulcer and Jerry Louis McGee and Sammy Akim and Samari Torre. That drives them too, because this guy, he's earned it. He's working for it, and I think it's a great story, because I think that he has a chance to really blossom into a special player, and he's had a tremendous amount of improvement over the last 9 months.
I think that a lot of people, sit there and say of what this team was when Bob Stitt was out and when Bobby Houck came in. To your point, whatever it was everywhere else, the wide receivers were about as good as you could get in terms of the group, certainly. And so then you just assume, okay, well, the Montana's set at wide receiver, and they are set at wide receiver,
But that doesn't mean that there aren't other guys who are going to come in and all of a sudden be competitive with the guys that are there. And I think that might be the thing that's surprising to a lot of people. Now, when that guy might be Mitch Roberts, maybe that becomes a little less surprising because the pedigree is certainly there. I mean, everybody saw what his brother Ben did when he, came for his final year of eligibility at the university level, walks off of the baseball field and onto the football field and, has one of the great games at wide receiver that we've seen against NDSU of all teams. So, I mean, that is, I don't. You don't want to put the pressure of the family on the kid, but you think that there is certainly some upside there, and if he can compete for playing time with the wide receiving core that they certainly have now, and maybe even like you said, a starting role or starting as a wide receiver is a little bit of a misnomer,
right?
Because there's so much rotation that happens. But if you're out there 30 reps a game, you are a starter regardless of whether you're on the football field for the first play of the game or not. And so, and I mean, I would think that would be, again, like if the presumption is that the position group's really good and there's a guy who's fighting for a starting spot within that's a freshman, that has to make you think really good things about his potential. And you're certainly right. I mean, this has been out on social media. It's been, and by the way, not our social media, the official Montana Grizzlies social media that has put the stamp of approval on it, that it could go out there, that he's making those plays, and like you said, he's getting the reps as well. Okay, very good. Who else you got?
Alex Gubner is a guy who came to Montana with a ton of talent out of Los Angeles area. He went to Chaminade Prep, same high school as Michael Ogine. But Alex Gubner, he was a really, really, really late signee. I mean, he didn't commit until less than a week before signing day, and so there was not much known about him. And the best thing I could say about Alex Gubner as an interior defensive lineman is that I've seen his jersey get ripped multiple times. Which, guess what that means?
Holding.
They can't block you.
Yeah.
When your jersey is all the way ripped, I mean, I've seen him happen to him twice. Right. It shows you the motor he has. I think he has a mean streak that he plays with, and he's just got a ton of natural size. I mean, he's 6'3", 290, and he has the strength to carry his weight. A lot of times, young guys, they don't have the balance yet. If you're 290 when you're 19, you can get knocked off your feet pretty easy, but he has good balance. He plays with good pad level, and I think his development, if he can prove that he can be a real contributor, I think that could just reinforce the depth of Montana's defensive line big time.
Matt Rensvold, another guy that you think, hey, pay attention.
I'm so interested to see how he reacts to the weight he's put on. He's up to 248 pounds, but anybody that watched this kid play in high school, I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. I thought he was one of the best basketball players in the state his senior year of high school. I mean, the kid can jump out of the gym, and a lot of people in the Montana program have told me that they think he's got the best hands on the team. And that's saying something when you got Jerry Louis McGee and Gabe Sulcer and Sammy Akem on your team. I think that the Montana tight ends, I thought they went from
Now, let's just be clear. He may not be the best catcher, but there is no question that Samuel Akem has the best hands on the team.
The biggest hands, that's for sure.
That is the best. I mean, they are the stuff of myth and legend. Samuel Akem's
he is.
hands.
Last time I was at practice, there was a scout from the Ravens there, and I was just shooting the breeze with them a little bit, and he said, "Hey, where's 18 from?" I said, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. He said, where's that? I said, exactly. That's why he's here, because he's from somewhere that no one went to look at him, because he goes, yeah, any college scout in the country sees that guy, they're like, oh, yeah, we'll take that guy.
Yeah. You think so?
And so, yeah, I mean,
anyway, sorry to railroad Matt Rensvold.
No, but Matt, with I think
Akem's hands.
The Montana tight ends were a group that didn't exist, and then they were brought back, and I think they went from a non-existent group to one of the best groups in the Big Sky Conference just in a year. And then you look at the fact that multiple of the guys in that group are young guys. I mean, they're going to lose Colin Bingham after this year, which is going to be a big loss, both just from a toughness standpoint, but also leadership standpoint. He's been rock solid for him. But you look at the rest of that group, Matt Rensvold and Bryson Deming are both going to be contributors this year. They're going to play a lot. That 3 tight end set that Montana ran last year, I mean, that was an undertold and crucial factor to them mitigating a lot of their weaknesses on the offensive line. They used those guys as secondary offensive linemen, basically. When they did short yardage stuff, they put 3 tight ends in the game, and those guys all played big roles. But then you look at the rest of that group, I think a couple of their other young players, including Joey Elwell out of Boise, I mean, the kid looks like a junior, not a freshman. The tight ends look really, really good, but Matt Rensvold is the guy that put on the most weight amongst those guys, and I'm just so interested to see if he can maintain his athleticism while being 250 pounds. I mean, now you're talking about a next-level guy because he is an unbelievable athlete. His whole thing was going to be, is he fast enough to play receiver, or can he get big enough to play tight end? Well, 6'4", 250 is big enough to play tight end. So if he can use the weight to his advantage, it could be pretty big.
It's Tootell Nuanez, the Montana Football Hour, presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. I know you got a couple more, but I got one that I'd like to throw out there from the other side of the mountain.
Sure.
And that is Jahari Martin. And Jahari Martin, when he was first recruited, got some notice because he was the only person willing to not wear a shirt during his recruiting visit in his own home while the coaching staff.
I wouldn't wear my shirt if I looked like him either.
Ever. Not for anything. Not to go to church, not to go to a wedding. I would never, ever put a shirt on, period. But he played, down in Florida, comes up here and played defense, primarily linebacker. And one piece of sound that you didn't hear from Jeff Choate, who was commenting about him during the press conference after the scrimmage, was that, they're pretty deep at linebacker right now in Montana State. He cited the number 14 linebackers. I don't know, okay, maybe rostered 14, but the point is they got, they feel pretty good about their linebackers. And as a freshman coming in, maybe there isn't the spot for him. But particularly if you're going to rotate 5 quarterbacks, maybe offense is where you go. But again, Jahari Martin, just like the physical thing is, it's hard to you can't miss it. You know what I mean? In terms of what he brings to the table, he's not a freshman in that respect. And second of all, a bit of a coup, I think, for Montana State to go down to Florida and get a guy to come all the way up to a Canadian bordering state to play football. And if they want to start handing him the football, though, I mean, when you talk about all of the different things and the different personnel packages that Matt Miller, is going to have to sift through and figure out what's going to work. But he's a guy who I think, has the physical gifts and the potential to be really good. And even, there's going to be so many guys getting touches. And we know Isaiah Fonse is going to be the lead running back. And then presumably I would think that Troy Anderson will be kind of the number 2 guy mixed in with some other guys and some Wildcat stuff. But if you can make your mark getting, if he gets 3 to 5 touches a game, who knows what that could turn into and what he's going to look like. And I think the arrow was pointed up for Jahari Martin.
I think that there's certain kids that you almost have to play. I mean, Jahari Martin was the MVP of the Florida 7A state championship team out of Lakeland. I mean, they beat St. Thomas Aquinas, which at the time was in the top 5 in the country. I mean, this kid had 140 tackles, like 30 tackles for loss for this team. So, people ask, why was he under-recruited? Well, he's not 6'1" like they list him on the roster. He's more like 5'10". And he doesn't have exceptional top-end speed, although he does have exceptional short area quickness. But I just think that a guy like him, like you said, he's physically ready to play. But I also think that if you redshirt him, you're not. He's one of your top 65 guys, just in terms of who you want running down on kicks and who you want running down on covering punts. So then you got to have, you're not gonna when you're making your travel roster, your 65-man travel roster, you're not going to take 14 linebackers with you. You're probably not even going to take 10, but you might take 5 running backs. And if there's a guy that can play special teams like Jahari Martin can, then all of a sudden, I mean, here's the thing: Jahari Martin scored 19 touchdowns as a senior in high school on only 34 carries.
Right. I mean,
true. That's a real stat. It's a real stat. He was just a goal line guy, and I think that's what they want, because Jeff Choate has always favored big goal line backs. He loved Chad Newell. He loved Nick Lassane. Last year, that guy was supposed to be Tyler Nate, but then Tyler Nate spinal stenosis, which ended his career, which was too bad for him and for Montana State. But Jahari Martin's going to play inside linebacker for the Cats before this thing's all said and done. But why not use him as your short yardage back? Still develop him as on both sides of the ball. I don't know. This is a lot less controversial of a guy going both ways than number 15 going both ways.
You mentioned St. Thomas Aquinas, the high school program. I would like to just a quick word, parenthetically, about St. Thomas Aquinas, the person.
Okay.
I was once at a place that had the unabridged works of St. Thomas Aquinas. They're volumes that appear to be encyclopedias, if you can remember when there was such a thing as encyclopedias floating around. And there was no less than 40, and I would honestly guess 50 of them, that if you stacked them on top of each other would be several feet high. He wrote them with a bird feather and an inkwell by hand. People in the 1400s. We're all lazy. Okay? That's all I'm saying. St. Thomas Aquinas, shout out. Okay, who else you got? Sleepers.
A couple other sleepers. For the Grizz, I think that...
I mean, there was no football to watch, so you had more time.
No doubt. It's easy to forget how good Brandon Purdy was 2 years ago. I mean, Brandon Purdy was third-team All-Big Sky 2 years ago. I mean, he made like 16 or 17 field goals. He was great. And then he had a little knee injury that then put him behind, and then Timmy Semenza rose up and beat out Brandon Purdy, and Brandon Purdy was kind of a non-factor on last year's team, but he's looked really good during camp, and he's a guy that's, I mean, he's a solid dude. He's a guy that is proven in games, and he works hard, and I think he's a guy that they trust, and I think that he has a chance to have a big year after. I mean, how many kickers are an all-league player and then essentially lose their job and then win it back? I mean, it's an interesting storyline for him.
Mm-hmm.
My last sleeper, we're talking about Jahari Martin for the Cats being a short yardage guy. One guy who's really popped to me at practice, and I don't know if he's quite ready just in terms of grasping the playbook or grasping what they want in the program, but physically he's ready, and that's Nick Ostmo. They were really excited when they got him out of Portland. He's a big running back. I mentioned Chad Newell for the Cats. He reminds me of Chad Newell. He's not quite as tall, but he's that big-bodied 6'1", 220-pound guy who a little bit of an upright runner, but when he gets behind his pads, he's got a lot of mass, and he looks physically very mature. And Bobby Houck mentioned him by name the other day, which I thought was surprising, kind of unprompted. And he's looked good in practice. He could be another short yardage option. As far as Montana State, a couple other guys that I thought have had good camps. Lavelle Price Jr. is a kid who was an out-of-state walk-on. And now with Munchie Filer likely being hurt or likely being out for at least early, and Munchie Filer was wearing a cast and a sling during the scrimmage on Saturday. Not sure what his actual injury is, but I would expect him to not at least play in the Texas Tech game. But with him out, they're going to have a brand new fight at corner, and I think that Lavelle Price is a guy that's played a lot, both in the spring and the fall. Got a lot of first and second team reps, so he's a guy that they might rely on pretty hard. A couple other true freshmen I think that are mentally there. I think they're mentally ready. Elijah King and Eric Zambrano. Both those are the only two true freshmen that were getting reps with the ones and the twos during the scrimmage. But those guys, it's not necessarily the physical elements, it's the mental elements. They're grasping the scheme, and I think that they could at least be on the travel roster. And then my last sleeper for the Cats is Daniel Hardy, because Montana State's going to play Troy Anderson on offense. They're going to. And there's going to be times, like when Troy Anderson goes, if he rips off a long touchdown, I don't think you can expect him to then just go right back in and play linebacker on the very next series.
Yes, you can. Every play, special teams, all of it.
Maybe. But Daniel Hardy.
Can they play him at center to create, +1 at quarterback? Well, what if the center just runs with the ball? Just pick it up and just take off. Put him there. You got all the blockers now.
They started playing him at nickelback last Tuesday, and he already looks like one of the best nickels in the league.
Well, look, man, enough. It's easy when you're talented. Did you hear the bitterness? Did that come through in the way that I said it?
Daniel Hardy's a talented kid, and he's going to have to be ready to play. I think he's going to have to play 35 snaps a game at Sam linebacker. And so I think that he has a chance to produce because he's a great athlete, but he's incredibly raw. He's a kid that didn't play football until his senior year of high school, went to junior college, and now he's really developed, but he needs to be good because when you take Troy Anderson out, you can't have a huge drop-off because then teams will just figure out a way to exploit that.
It's Tootell Nuanez. It's the Montana Football Hour presented by Lithia Ford. It's also, as it turns out today, the second hour of the show because Osprey Baseball is hoping to play a doubleheader starting in about 15 minutes. So we'll see about that. As we're coming up, evidently there's a little bit of an issue with the umpires, if they are at the right location and even in the right town is an open question at this moment in time. So we'll see how that comes about. But nonetheless, we will certainly finish here next with all of you.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Alpine Touch has been providing you with the distinct seasonings you know and love for decades. Now, Alpine Touch has something to help you unleash the freshness of all the delicious flavors you need to spice up any meal. Check out Alpine Touch's new coarse grinds, unleashing the fresh taste of the garlic pepper or all-purpose seasonings to please any nose or taste bud. Coarse grinds can be purchased by the pound at retail locations around the state or at alpinetouch.com. Use the code ESPN10 at checkout to get 10% off any online order. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, who pump it up, pump it up.
Don't think you have time for lunch? Town Pump has your back right down the road. Burritos in the deli are $2 for $2.22. Wash it down with your favorite fountain-sized drink, any size, for just $1. Pick up lunch or a snack on your way to summer adventure at Town Pump.
Town Pump, right down the road, pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Here at Florence Coffee, our Huckleberry Lemonade is a favorite to our lineup of refreshing summer drinks.
For a fun twist on my favorite drink, you can get it made with our house-brewed iced black tea or soda water for a fizzy treat that's sure to beat the summer heat.
So stop by any Flowco locations throughout western Montana and visit FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
The best flavor under the big sky, Florence Coffee Company.
Have you been hurt or disabled? Are you missing time from work and not sure what to do? I'm attorney Chris Helmer, and Clark Fork Law Offices in Missoula is here to help. Our team specializes in worker compensation, personal injury, and Social Security disability. We fight for the benefits you deserve. Call Clark Fork Law at 728-0168 for a free consultation or visit clarkforklaw.com. Again, 728-0168.
If it matters to Missoula, it matters to us. Ryan Tootell and Colter Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, the Montana Football Hour. Yes, it is Ryan Tootell and Colter Nuanez. Thank you, Jim. Still. The Montana Football Hour presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. I see what you're doing on beat. I thought you were just turning it up when I was talking, but now I understand.
I'm just being artistic in my production style, Ryan.
Definitely not annoying. Kurtz Polaris is at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you missed anything in the show, check it out on the podcast. The podcast available all over the place. It's your favorite podcasting platforms. Tootell Nuanez podcast. Get it, listen to it, like it, whatever that is. The podcast is available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. Colter, as we wrap up here the Montana Football Hour and consequently the show, an early show today, unless you're on SWX with us, in which case thank you, and hope you're enjoying a nice dinner. There's a new policy that is a clear bag policy for Washington Grizzly Stadium, in which they are going to allow some small bags in, but basically anything that is brought into the stadium has got to be in a clear see-through bag. They want to expedite the is it the egress? I forget the word. The going in process at the gate rather than digging through everybody's bag. It'll be easier to be able to just look through the bag. That makes sense. The only issue is, of course, that I don't know that Louis Vuitton has gone for the translucent version as of yet, and so trying to obtain a bag. And look, man, let's be honest. Later in the year. Look, there's plenty of people trying to get plenty of things that they want to have to enjoy to themselves while they're in their chair into the stadium in their bags. Of course, we all understand this. But also, in the event that it could possibly be, 20 degrees or less, there's a lot of people who are bringing a lot of very legitimate things into the stadium for themselves, for their children, and so on and so forth. And I don't know how big a clear bag you can get, but I do think that I understand this policy. I'm not saying this is a bad one, but I do think it has its drawbacks, and I'm not exactly sure how this is ultimately really going to be put into practice. I mean, are you really going to tell, a ticket-holding patron, a mother with her 2 kids who's got, a bag that isn't clear, no, you can't come in here? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to go, but I understand what you're trying to accomplish with this, and I think it's going to be at times difficult in practice.
Especially early.
Right.
I actually think this will it'll make entering the stadium faster once everybody's got it down.
Right.
But there's just inevitably going to be a lot of people that just didn't hear about it, or because it's been all over the news. We're talking about it right now, but inevitably there'll be somebody that's bringing their big bag that they've brought for 50 years, and they've been a season ticket holder since the 70s or whatever. And they got their blankets and they got their hot chocolate and. It could just be a logistical headache initially.
The good news is presumably when it is cold like that, there will have been several games worth of it.
So 1 gallon plastic storage bag or a clear 12 by 6 by 12 inch tote bag, which they're selling all over the place, including MSO Hub. We're going to have some down at our pregame show party. Where people will be selling those. Or you can have a small clutch bag up to 4.5 inches. The other thing is seat cushions, cameras, binoculars, blankets carried over your shoulder, medical bags. Those are all still allowed.
Yeah.
So basically it's just your stuff that you're bringing in has to be unless it's a blanket.
I could just see somebody just carrying boatloads of things, just no bag.
Right.
And having it be a little bit of a problem, I mean, some people just don't have the gift of packing light. You know what I mean? I would also, though, September the 7th, when it's probably going to be 85 degrees, I'd be very wary of the guy in the big overcoat, in the down jacket. There's definitely something being hidden in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bag anymore. It's on the person. Yeah, all right. Well, we'll see what's going on. Do they have anything like that at Montana State?
They do. They implemented something like this a couple years ago.
Is it
actually
a clear bag thing, or is it just a size deal, or what?
I don't know the specific details, but I think it's very similar. I think it's clear bag and just the process of checking everything diligently.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, very good. Let's look forward to this. Boys and girls, enjoyed the show today with all of you. Again, a little early show today. Get ready for Osprey baseball. Hopefully, perhaps later on today, if they can get some umpires to call the game, that'll be helpful. Kind of need them to play a baseball game, so we'll see if that comes around. The Montana Football Hour, presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. Going to be here all week. Going to be here all month. Okay, I know that there's been significant blowback, particularly from Colter Nuanez, and now I got somebody gunning for my job, so I'm going to stick around for the remainder of the football season with all of you. Good choice, Tommy.
It wasn't mine.
Tommy played Under the Bridge on his Trail Afternoon show today, too.
Listen to it. It's excellent work. Boys and girls, have a wonderful, wonderful Monday evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Tootell, Nuanez, and Tommy, ESPN Radio.
I got a bad disease. Bleed insanity, it seems. It's got me by You gotta let it be, oh yeah. Where I go, I just don't know. Like I took, gotta take it slow. When I find my peace of mind, I'm gonna give you some of my good time.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.